to today's episode of Financial Minds. I'm Jaime Agostino, your host. Today, I am joined by the Carolina Credit Union League to spotlight the people, ideas, and conversations that are shaping the future of credit unions across the Carolinas by diving into one of the most important, impactful parts of our movement, advocacy. Joining me today are Billy and Nathan. Billy, please take a moment and introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. My name is Billy Boylston, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Advocacy here at the League. I'm over the Advocacy Department and almost coming up on my 12th year next week.
All right. Wow. Congratulations. Nathan, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having us as well. But my name is Nate Lane. I am the Director of Federal Affairs for the Carolinas Credit Union League. I've been here for just shy of 3 years now. And prior to this, I was up in DC for about a decade working both on and off the Hill.
Okay. All right. Well, for those not familiar with the Carolina Credit Union League, could you explain what the League does in relationship to advocacy?
Yeah, appreciate that. I'll jump in on that one. So obviously the Carolinas Credit Union League, we are the trade association for all the credit unions in both North and South Carolina. For advocacy, the Carolinas Credit Union League advocates on behalf of the credit unions of both Carolinas and also in both Raleigh, Columbia, and Washington, D.C. So we spearhead efforts at both state capitals, obviously Washington, D.C., with focuses on, regulatory burdens and also issues such as preserving our tax status, advancing pro-credit union legislation, grassroots mobilizations, and other items as well.
Okay. All right. So how does the League then engage with lawmakers and regulators at both the state and federal levels?
Yeah, we have a lot of different mediums that we use to engage with lawmakers. The first thing that we do have, we have dedicated subject matter experts is the way we look at it. Okay. In our department, there's 4 of us. We have Carson Butts, who is our North Carolina Legislative Affairs Manager. In his role, he focuses on all North Carolina state-specific issues coming out of Raleigh and other items as well. And then we have Spears Goodlett, who is our South Carolina Legislative Affairs and Legislative and Political Affairs Manager. In his role, he oversees the state-specific issues out of Columbia and also oversees our PAC things in both Carolinas. And obviously, with Nate being our Director of Federal Affairs, he focuses on the federal side of things at the House. But as far as how do we engage, we do various items throughout the year. We have a couple of things we do up in D.C. that are annual events, such as our Government Affairs Conference. That we do a smaller group for Hike the Hill. And then we spearhead and facilitate meetings here at home. We love getting lawmakers and staffs into credit unions to see firsthand the work that they do. So while we like to talk about it and showcase what our credit unions are doing, there's nothing better than getting staff and members into credit unions.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you keep credit unions then in your regions informed about policy changes or any upcoming regulation?
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in on that. For one, we do have a weekly newsletter that we distribute to our members, highlighting previous and upcoming actions at the state and federal levels. Just last year, we also established an advocacy-specific social media channels, really meant to keep credit unions informed in real time. With some of our more time-sensitive information, we do send specific email blasts out to either, CEOs, executives, or to our entire listserv. And in cases that require more immediate action, we set up grassroots messaging that makes it easier for our members to reach out directly to elected officials regarding specific issues.
Okay. Well, Billy had already kind of mentioned a little bit, but tell me more about, the events that you guys do in Washington, as well as, back home in North and South Carolina, that the League puts together, to magnify these issues that your credit unions are facing.
Yeah, I'm happy to expand upon those. The Hike the Hill event that Billy had mentioned previously, we generally hold in the fall, and that's a trip up to DC with about 30 to 40 normally of our credit union professionals across the Carolinas to meet with both regulators and members of Congress. Just this past October, we had a great, despite the government shutdown, we had a great group of meetings. I mean, we met with all 25 of our 25 Hill offices, as well as had a great meeting with NCUA Chairman Kyle Hopman. So I think that our group was very happy there. Again, we're also deeply involved with the Government Affairs Conference, bringing, I feel like for the past 3 or 4 years, it's been record numbers up to DC from the Carolinas. Yeah. Looking forward to another record year this upcoming March as well. But there we also try to meet with federal lawmakers in a larger group setting on the Hill. And then, as far as state and federal go, we are always trying to set up meetings, looking for any opportunity that we can to set up meetings with our lawmakers back home in their districts, with their constituents, either at a credit union branch or another location, to get them to engage, firsthand with those living in their districts.
Okay. So what are some of the biggest issues currently affecting the credit unions in the Carolinas?
I can start federally and then we can shift right on down to the state houses. As always, right now and as always, I think our biggest, most consistent issue is the preservation of the credit union tax status. But we're also, during those meetings that I mentioned previously with members, we're also frequently discussing interchange, fraud prevention, deregulation, CDFI program continuity, increasing loan maturities, central liquidity facility. I mean, just to name a few. But as I said, I think Billy can take it from here and speak a little better to what's going on in the state houses.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And there's no shortage of issues this year. I think you can turn on the TV or look at a website. There's going to be something new every single hour, it feels like. But yeah, we got a lot of things happening in both Columbia and Raleigh. Proactively in Raleigh, we are looking to update our state charter. We have a state charter modernization bill that we've been working on for a couple of years now. We've got some good progress, and it's currently in a conference committee between the House and Senate. So we're working through that. The other issues that we're looking at, and one thing people don't always realize on the state houses, there's a lot of issues that affect federal credit unions and state charter credit unions alike. So just because you're a federally chartered credit union doesn't mean issues out of the state house don't affect you. A lot of times DC kind of gets a lot of the attention, but one of the things that came out this year through North Carolina was an interchange bill. There's been interchange legislation in DC for the last couple of years, which would have a just very negative impact on our credit unions, which ultimately would be bad for our members. But there's been some efforts lately for state houses to pass legislation. And last year there was a bill introduced in Raleigh, and through our efforts, we were able to help get that bill quietly killed. So we're happy to see that, which was a big benefit to our credit unions. And then in South Carolina, we're working on being able to change the statutes to allow cities and counties to put public deposits into credit unions. Right now, in about 28 states, allow public deposits to be made in credit unions, with Wyoming being the last state to pass it, and then Florida before that. It's not currently permissible in North Carolina or Georgia. So we're hopeful we can get it done in South Carolina this year. So that's our big focus in Columbia.
All right. Are there any recent advocacy wins that you're especially proud of?
Yeah, I can take this one. Absolutely. I think, I mentioned credit union tax status being consistently our most important issue. And just this past July, when the reconciliation bill was signed into law, we secured the omission of any changes to that tax status, which we're thrilled about. And this was the culmination of a months-long grassroots campaign targeting our federally elected delegation to highlight the importance of our status to our underlying model as credit unions. In total, we had, I believe, just over 65,000 credit union members across both states write to all 25 of our federal lawmakers to make their voices heard. We also met with each member of Congress or their staff multiple times throughout last year on this issue, especially with Chairman of the Senate Banking, Tim Scott, right here in South Carolina, as well as other members on committees of jurisdiction. And additionally, speaking of Senator Scott, we've also been working with his office more recently regarding currency transaction reporting requirements for credit unions. And I'm extremely happy to report that he just introduced the Streamlined Act, which would relieve some of those reporting burdens. So we're really looking forward to our continued partnership with his office on this and other legislative initiatives, as we close out the year and into next.
All right. So what challenges do credit unions face when it comes to educating these lawmakers about, their unique structure as well as their mission?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll jump in on this one. Honestly, a lot of times credit unions I say we're way too humble because there's a lot of things that we do in the community just because that's in our DNA, right? As a not-for-profit member-owned institution, it's ingrained in credit unions to strengthen the communities. When the communities thrive, we thrive, and vice versa. So some of the challenges that we have is really just telling our story. But elections matter. After you get somebody educated on credit unions, whether it's an elected official or congressional staff, there's a lot of turnover. So you're constantly having to tell your story. So it's something that just has to happen, regularly. And you have to remember, whether it's, we did a lot of good. I know Nate's going to touch on it a little bit on the shutdown, but, the works that credit unions do around financial literacy, around, one member, one vote, the things that we do when a natural disaster hits, like in the Carolinas with Hurricane Helene just about a year ago. Those are the things that make us different, that we in the advocacy department, we take a lot of pride in being that mouthpiece for credit unions to ensure that when we have the tax issue and when we're saying that credit unions are different, this is what we mean. Just last week, we had a great roundtable with one of our credit unions, and we had about 15 city and county officials. And the purpose of that meeting was just to sit down and educate the city, county, and some state officials on what the credit union does in the community, connecting dots, just reminding them, the footprint that they have. And out of that discussion, there's 2 or 3 people who were talking about, I didn't know you did financial literacy. Can you come into my church? And they're like, absolutely, we can. So there's a lot of education on the grassroots level like that we help facilitate, and take a lot of pride in that.
All right. So how do regulatory or legislative changes like CFPB rules or taxation or, the cybersecurity laws, how are they impacting the credit unions and their members?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I'll say this to start. The league does follow the regulatory space extremely closely. Yeah. After all, regulatory compliance is what credit unions are dealing with on a daily basis. That's probably how they're most connected to their federal and state governments. Thankfully, this current administration has made changes to the regulatory environment that do better reflect, at times, challenges created by overburdensome regulations of the past. That being said, there's still plenty of work to be done. And I think my primary job for the foreseeable future is to ensure that credit unions have not only a seat at the table, but a voice when input is needed to craft new regulatory guidelines.
Are there any specific bills or policy proposals that you are watching right now?
Absolutely. The league tracks, hundreds, I'm confident in saying hundreds of bills each legislative session at both the state and federal levels. For example, on the federal side, focus has currently shifted to the National Defense Authorization Act, as it has the greatest likelihood of being a vehicle for other legislation such as, pro-CDFI and central liquidity facility bills, and even from what I'm hearing, potentially CU board modernization, loan maturity language, which we do continue to be in talks with Chairman Scott's team on as well. Following the government shutdown, which did significantly slow legislative momentum, The NDAA does seem to be the best vehicle moving forward, at least throughout the remainder of this year, to see positive credit union legislation enacted. So primary focus is definitely currently there.
Okay. So what role do local credit unions then play in the advocacy process, and how do they get involved?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, simply put, they play a major role. At the end of the day, the local credit unions are the constituents of the lawmakers. So when we go in, we do our visits, whether it's Hike the Hill or GAC, having our local credit unions able to be there and talk about things that they're seeing in their communities. That's the most important thing. So when we're talking about legislation, we're using real numbers, using real people, but only because of the impact and engagement of our local credit unions do lawmakers really take note of what's happening. So they're really the boots on the ground and able to give those real world implications. So that's a big deal when we do our visits.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So looking ahead, what do you see as the top advocacy priorities for next year or the next 2 years?
Yet another great question. um, Sometimes difficult to see that far ahead, but we're always prepared. Um, I'll say that a huge piece of advocacy is relationships and how we can utilize those relationships to bring our objectives to the forefront of both legislators' minds and to the top of their list of priorities. I've already mentioned things like tax, interchange, fraud prevention, um, you know, loan maturity, board modernization, CDFI. But it's ultimately those relationships that we cultivate that get us across the finish line on any of them. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that we will be in an election cycle next year, as Billy said. So there is that added element that we're forced to take into consideration. Um, you know, Redistricting and a new map creates bigger question marks surrounding one particular North Carolina district in the House. And of course, we have Senior Senator Tom Tillis retiring at the end of the next year. On the South Carolina side, 2 members of the House of Representatives are currently running for South Carolina governor, and they won't be in DC next Congress. So 2 fresh faces there. So plenty to keep us busy. And I know there's also plenty upcoming on the state side as well.
All right. Well, Billy, Nate, thank you so much. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're currently looking for a financial service provider that's offering that personal touch that you just haven't found elsewhere, and that also gives you the keys to your own financial freedom, and if you haven't already, I'd strongly encourage you to walk into a credit union and open an account today. If I can offer yet another example, during the recent government shutdown, credit unions worked tirelessly to accommodate those negatively affected. Things like skip-a-pays and no-interest loans, to name a few, really highlight the credit union model of care and attention to their members' personal finances, and not just during times of financial hardships either. I think that's what really sets us apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add on the back of that with, the credit unions in the Carolinas serving over 6 million members combined. We're a pretty good political force. And as Nate mentioned, there's going to be some elections coming up, and those always have consequences and impacts for everybody. And we just ask people to stay involved and stay engaged with that in credit union land. And like we always like to say, if you're looking for just a PAC check, you can go see the banks. But if you want to win an election, come see your credit union. So our doors are always open.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. A huge thank you to our guests and to all of you that are joining us in this conversation about the power of credit union advocacy. And a special thanks to Viso Financial and its payments QSO, MyCU Services FedNow solution for sponsoring today's episode. The FedNow service is here. With this instant payment solution now available, there are lots of avenues to explore for your credit union. Do you want to send or receive, or both? How will you connect to the service? How will you settle? Your credit union's instant payment journey is just beginning, and Viso Financial and MyCU Services are here to help you get started. Contact a Viso Financial Corporate Account Manager today or visit www.vfccu.org to learn more. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share the episode as well as subscribe. Until next time, keep championing the credit union difference and keep advocating for the people we serve. Thanks for listening and make it a great day.